Story 1, The Extra Stake. I want you to picture something. You're asleep in your tent in a forest at 2 in the morning. No one else for miles. And when you wake up at first light and unzip the door, there's a stake in the ground, right next to where your head was pressed against the tent wall all night. It's not one of yours. It's heavy. It's iron. And it's been driven in so deep you can't pull it out with your bare hands. Someone was standing over you while you were sleeping, and you didn't hear a thing. I want to say I went out there to clear my head. That's the thing people always say, right? Life gets loud, you go somewhere quiet. And the Shawnee National Forest in southern Illinois is about as quiet as it gets. This was mid-October, about 3 years ago. Peak foliage season. The kind of weekend where the forecast says 42 degrees overnight and you pack like it's 25. Because the forecast always lies when you're sleeping on the ground. I drove down from Champaign on a Friday after work. Left around 6 p.m., stopped at a Casey's for a gas station burrito I already knew I'd regret, and rolled into the Garden of the Gods trailhead parking lot at just before 9. The lot was empty except for a beat-up green Subaru with a cracked back window and Indiana plates. Didn't think much of it. People leave cars overnight all the time. They go in Friday, come out Sunday. Common thing. I sat in my truck for a minute with the engine off, just listening. After 2 hours of highway noise, the silence out there has a weight to it. Presses on your eardrums. You can hear dry leaves skittering across the asphalt. And when the wind drops, you hear absolutely nothing at all. Not crickets, not birds, just October quiet. I geared up fast. 40-liter pack, a 3-season tent, a sleeping bag rated to 15 degrees, a small cooking kit, a headlamp, enough food for 2 nights. I've been doing solo trips like this for years. I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy who likes being uncomfortable outdoors more than he likes being comfortable indoors. I know the difference. The trail into my campsite was about 1.5 miles. Dense oak and hickory on both sides. My headlamp throwing a narrow yellow cone ahead. Everything outside that cone was solid black. October leaves on the trail are loud underfoot. Every step I took sounded like a bag of chips being opened. I remember being aware of how much noise I was making, and at the same time noticing that the forest around me was completely, utterly still. I got to my spot, a flat clearing I'd used once before, maybe 30 yards off the main trail, and set up around 9:45 p.m. I always drive my stakes with a rock because I keep forgetting my mallet. For stakes total, 1 at each corner. I pressed each one down into the dirt with my boot before hammering them flush. I'm particular about my stakes. I triple-checked them because I had a tent collapse on me in the Ozarks once during a windstorm, and I've been paranoid ever since. I ate the burrito cold, drank a liter of water, and was in my bag by 10:30. The night was cold and clear. I could hear my own breathing. I think I was asleep in under 5 minutes. I woke up at 2:14 a.m. I know the time because I checked my watch. The instinctive thing you do when something pulls you out of sleep and you can't immediately explain why. I lay completely still in the dark. My heart was doing that stuttering rhythm it does when you wake up startled but quietly. The tent was fine. No wind. I listened for 30 seconds and heard nothing. I told myself it was the cold, or a dream I couldn't remember.
I rolled over.
That's when I heard it. One step, just one, maybe 15, 20 feet from the tent. The sound was wrong. Too heavy for a deer, too deliberate. Deer don't take one careful step and freeze. Whatever made that sound had either stopped moving the moment it made the noise, or it had never been moving fast to begin with. I didn't move for a long time. I counted to 60. Nothing. Counted to 60 again. Nothing. I've heard raccoons at night. I've heard coyotes. Owls launching off branches in the dark. This wasn't any of those. This was the sound of something with mass and intention setting its weight down on the earth and then choosing to be very, very still. I told myself it was a deer. That's what you do. You need a story that makes sense or you don't sleep at all. I fell back into something that wasn't quite sleep. When my watch alarm went off at 6:30, the tent was filled with thin gray light. Birds had started. A woodpecker somewhere off to the left. Wind in the high branches. Normal sounds. I lay there for a minute, just listening. Then I unzipped the fly. My boot at the entrance where I'd left it. The ground pale in the early light. And then I saw it. 3 inches from where the tent wall had been pressed against my head all night. There was a stake in the ground. Not one of mine. My 4 stakes were at the corners, exactly where I'd put them. This was a 5th. Heavy. Iron. Black with old rust. 8 or 9 inches long. Driven almost flush with the soil. Flat rectangular head, like a shortened railroad spike. The kind of thing you don't find at REI. The kind of thing you find in a shed that hasn't been opened since 1987. I just stared at it. My brain kept trying to rewind. Had I used 5 stakes? Had I missed it in the dark? I walked the tent perimeter. For stakes. Orange. Lightweight aluminum, the kind that bend if you look at them wrong. This thing was iron. It was half the length of my forearm. It took me 2 minutes and a tent pole used as a lever to get it out of the ground. I broke camp in 11 minutes. Pure adrenaline. Shoving gear into my pack without rolling anything. Skipping coffee. Skipping food. I looked at the tree line every few seconds. The forest looked exactly normal in the morning light. That was almost the worst part. Just trees and leaves and birdsong. Like nothing had happened at all. I didn't see a single person on the trail out. The green Subaru was still in the parking lot. I've thought about the timing a lot since then. The footstep at 2:14 a.m. Whether that sound was someone walking toward me or away from me. Whether I heard them arrive or whether I only heard them leave. Someone was close enough to my head to drive that stake into frozen October ground without waking me. Either I slept through the hammering, or they were patient enough to work it in slowly, an inch at a time in the dark while I was right there. I still camp solo. I haven't stopped, but I count my stakes when I put them in and count them again every morning. So far, the number is always right. So far, whoever drove that stake knew exactly where my head was. They stood over me in the dark and they listened to me breathe. The next time you wake up at 2 in the morning and can't explain why, think about what you might be deciding not to hear. Story 2. The Midnight Whistler. I'm going to describe something that happened to me on a lake in Arkansas, and I need you to really sit with it. Not the fear of it, the patience of it. Because the thing that stood in the dark outside my camp that night wasn't frantic. It wasn't angry. It was having a good time. For 2 hours and 52 minutes, it stood in the same spot at the edge of the tree line, 30 yards from where I was sitting with a knife in my hand, and it whistled. The same cheerful little tune, over and over. It never came closer. It never spoke. It never showed itself. And when it finally stopped, it was like it had gotten exactly what it came for. I need to preface this by saying I am not someone who gets scared easily. I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps. I've been in genuinely dangerous situations where the consequences were real and immediate, and I stayed functional. I say that not to impress anyone, but because I need you to understand what it means when I tell you that I sat in a camp chair for nearly 3 hours that night without moving, knife in my hand, and I didn't do it because I was brave. I did it because I was too scared to do anything else. I'd driven down from Missouri for a 4-day solo kayak camping trip on Lake Washita in Arkansas. If you've never been, it's a reservoir surrounded by Washita National Forest, over 40,000 acres of water, hundreds of inlets and coves where you can pitch a tent and genuinely not see another person for days. I'd done the trip twice before. I knew the water. I figured I'd be alone. I paddled about 6 miles in on Thursday morning and made camp on a small peninsula, maybe 50 yards at its widest, water on 3 sides, dense pine forest at my back. I set up the tent, built a fire ring, Spent the afternoon fishing and not catching anything. High 60s, low humidity, the lake flat and faintly green. I was exactly as relaxed as I'd hoped to be. I ate dinner around 7 p.m., dehydrated chili over the fire, second whiskey from the flask, and watched the sky go from orange to purple to full dark. Stars out over Ouachita on a clear night are extraordinary. I sat there looking at them for a while, not thinking about anything in particular. Somewhere across the water, maybe a quarter-mile off, I could hear what I thought was another camper's radio. Low and indistinct, barely a murmur. I put the fire out around 10 p.m., did my bear hangout of habit, and went to bed. Asleep by 10:30. I woke up at 12:17 a.m., and I heard it immediately, whistling, from the tree line at the back of the peninsula. 80 feet, maybe 100. A tune I almost recognized, the kind of thing you'd hear around a campfire at a summer camp, bouncy and simple, 3 or 4 bars that looped back on itself. My first thought, neighbor, someone else camping nearby, a night owl walking back from the water. People whistle. It's a completely normal thing to do. I lay there and waited for it to fade, for whoever it was to walk past and disappear into the dark. It didn't fade. It didn't move. Same tune, same tempo, same spot. I checked my watch. 12:17. I waited another 5 minutes. Still the same 3-bar loop, still coming from the exact same direction, at the exact same volume. Not louder, not softer, not closer, just present. I sat up in my sleeping bag and grabbed my headlamp without turning it on. I just sat in the dark and listened to a person, and it was clearly a person. I could hear the breath between phrases, stand at the edge of my tree line and whistle. I almost called out. I opened my mouth, had the words ready. Hey, you all right out there? And something stopped me. I don't know what. Some part of my brain that had been paying closer attention than the rest of me. Because the thing I kept coming back to was this. They weren't moving. A lost camper moves. A drunk person stumbles, changes direction, makes other noise. This person stood in a single spot for over 40 minutes and didn't take a step in any direction. The volume never changed. The direction never changed. They were rooted. At 1:05 a.m., the whistling stopped. I didn't breathe. 30 seconds. Full minute. Then it started again. Same tune. Same spot. Like a record that had been paused and unpaused. I moved to my camp chair just outside the tent and sat there with my knife open, blade across my thigh. I wasn't going to sleep. I knew that much. So I chose the position where I had the most visibility, where I could stand up fast if I needed to, and I watched the dark shape of the tree line and I listened. The whistling went on until 3:09 a.m. I checked my watch every few minutes, not out of impatience, but because marking time gave me something to do besides imagine what was standing out there choosing not to move. 2 hours and 52 minutes. The tune never changed. The position never changed. At no point did whoever it was take a step toward me. At no point did they take a step away. 3:09 mid-phrase it stopped. No fade out. No footsteps leaving. No snapping branches. Just silence like a switch had been flipped. The forest came back. Crickets, water, the faint sound of wind. I sat in that chair until first light. At 6 a.m. I finally stood up, headlamp on, and swept the beam across the peninsula and into the edge of the tree line. Nothing, just pines. Darkness between them, the ground undisturbed. No footprints, no compression in the needles, no cigarette ends, no trash, no broken branches at chest height where someone would have pushed through. Nothing to confirm anyone had been there at all. I've run through the explanations. A prank. But by whom? And why here? And how did they disappear without a sound? A sound trick, some strange acoustic effect bouncing off the water. But the tune was too clear, too consistent, too human in its breathing. An animal, but no animal whistles in 3/4 time and stops precisely on the beat. Here's what I keep landing on. I never confirmed anyone was there. I have no evidence. I have a direction and a duration and a feeling that sat in my chest for months afterward like a stone. But I also know that I packed up at 6:30 a.m. and paddled 6 miles back to the trailhead. Fast. Didn't stop. Didn't eat. Kept my paddle strokes short and hard and watched both banks the entire way. Because a whistle carries a long way over open water. And I wanted to be sure, I really wanted to be sure, that I'd stopped being able to hear it. You can explain away a footstep. You can explain away a shadow. But 2 hours and 52 minutes of perfect patience, in the dark, outside a stranger's camp, that's not confusion. That's a choice. Whatever was out there that night, it knew exactly what it was doing. And it was enjoying it. Story 3. The trail cam footage. At 3:02 in the morning, I was asleep in my hammock somewhere in the middle of Teodotin State Forest in Pennsylvania. Miles from any road. No one else around, or so I thought. My phone buzzed. Trail cam notification. I tapped it. The image loaded slowly on the weak cellular signal, top of the frame first. Leaves. My hammock straps. And then the rest of the image loaded. There was a man standing directly underneath me. He was in a bright orange safety vest. And he was looking up. I set up the trail cam because of deer. I want to be clear about that because in hindsight it sounds like I set it up because I knew something was wrong. I didn't. I mounted a Bushnell cellular trail cam on a hemlock about 15 feet from my hammock because I was doing a solo section hike on the Black Forest Trail in Pennsylvania and the area was known for good whitetail activity. I thought I'd wake up to pictures of does. That's all. A guy who likes wildlife photography, sleeping in the woods, pointing a camera at the dark. I'm telling you this because the innocence of it makes the whole thing so much worse. The Black Forest Trail runs about 42 miles through Teodotin State Forest in north-central Pennsylvania. Remote is an understatement. The nearest town of any real size is 40 minutes of switchback forest roads from most trailheads. Cell service through much of the interior is patchy at best. I was 2 days into the loop several miles from the nearest road, genuinely alone in the way solo backpackers specifically go out there to be alone. I picked 2 hemlocks about 14 feet apart, rigged my tarp in an A-frame overhead, and spent 20 minutes positioning the trail cam on a 3rd tree with the field of view angled toward the hammock from the side. I set it to send a cellular photo alert on any motion trigger, turned on my phone's notification sound, and figured I'd have a nice little gallery to scroll through in the morning. Freeze-dried Thai peanut noodles for dinner, which are genuinely better than they sound. I ate on a log and watched the August light go slowly out of the canopy above me. Katydids and cicadas, that heavy summer insect noise that means warm air and late season. I love that sound. I was in my hammock by 8:30, reading on my phone with the brightness all the way down. I was asleep before it was fully dark. My phone buzzed at 11:17 p.m. Trail cam image. 2 deer eyes glowing white in the infrared. I swiped it away and went back to sleep.
12:04 a.m.
Another deer. A doe from the body shape. I smiled and closed my eyes.
12:51 a.m.
Empty frame, probably a branch in a gust. I didn't even look at it fully. 3:02 a.m., it buzzed again. I grabbed it without thinking. Tapped the notification. The image loaded slowly on the weak signal the way images always did out there, top of the frame first, bleeding down in strips. Leaves. Sky glow between the canopy. The hemlock trunks. The ratchet straps of my hammock in the upper corner. And then the rest of the image loaded. There was a man standing directly underneath my hammock. He was looking up. He was wearing a high-visibility orange safety vest over dark clothing, the kind road crews wear, the kind that's designed to be seen. His face was angled straight up at where I was lying, which put it in deep shadow in the infrared, but the shape of it was unmistakable. A face, looking up, At me. His hands were at his sides. He wasn't moving. The trail cam's short delay meant he'd been standing there for several seconds before the sensor even fired. He was close enough to my hammock that he could have reached up and grabbed it. He could have grabbed me. I didn't move. I was afraid that if the hammock swayed, he'd know I was awake. So I lay there, completely rigid, phone against my chest so the screen light didn't bleed through the tarp. And I listened. The insects had stopped. I don't know when that happened. Sometime in those first seconds after the image loaded. Without me noticing, the forest had gone silent. Not the comfortable quiet of the small hours, the particular silence of everything around you deciding to hold still at the same moment. My knife was in my pack pocket, hanging off the end of the hammock. I reached for it so slowly that it took close to a full minute to get my hand there. I didn't unzip. I pressed my palm against the fabric over the handle and just held it there. At 3:09 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Another image. I held my breath and looked at it. Empty frame, trees, my suspension straps. Nothing below them. He was gone. I lay there until 4:30 a.m. I didn't sleep. I didn't make a sound. At 4:30, I turned on my headlamp, dropped out of the hammock, put my back against the hemlock, and swept the beam through every degree of darkness around me. Nothing. Leaf litter, trees, the gray early light starting to come down through the canopy. I broke camp in the dark and hiked out 4 miles to the nearest forest road with my headlamp on and my hand resting on the top of my pack strap. I sat in my locked car at the trailhead for a long time before I could make myself drive. Later, in daylight, I went back through the image archive. The 3:02 a.m. photo was the only one with a person in it. The others, deer, a branch, empty frames were exactly what they looked like. Just the one. Just him. He hadn't come from the trail. The trail was a 1/4 mile off. He'd moved through dense forest at 3 in the morning, off any marked path, with no light I could see, to stand beneath a stranger's hammock in a high-visibility vest and look up. I've thought about the vest a lot. It's the detail I can't file away. Everything else about it is frightening in the way that anything frightening in the dark is frightening. But the vest bothers me on a different level. You wear a safety vest when you want to be seen, when visibility matters, when you're somewhere that other people are moving through. He was in the middle of a state forest at 3 a.m. with no light and no trail. Who was he trying to be visible to? The image is still on my phone. I've zoomed into his face probably 30 times. That upturned oval of infrared shadow, looking for something that explains it. Some expression I can read and file under confused or lost or drunk. It always just looks like someone doing exactly what they meant to do. Here's the thing I've never been able to let go of. The Bushnell trail cam I use, it's a cellular model. It sends photos to an app, cloud account, and that account has a login, which means, theoretically, that it can be accessed from anywhere. I've told myself he didn't know about the camera. I've told myself he couldn't have been watching the same images load on his own phone in real time, watching me open each one, knowing exactly when I saw him, knowing exactly when I knew he was there. I've told myself that. He stood there for at least 7 minutes. One image at 3:02, another at 3:09 with him gone. 7 minutes of standing under a sleeping stranger in the dark, looking up, not moving. Think about every night you've slept outside in a tent, in a hammock, in the back of a car. Think about how many hours no one was watching. Or think about how you really can't know that. Either way, you're gonna think about it tonight. I promise you that.